Welcome back to the fourth part in this short Orbiter 2016 series, examining better ways to implement TransX escape burns for low thrust vessels. In the previous episodes, we've demonstrated the standard TransX usage for setting up escape burns. We've shown how TransX can fall over if the thrust capability of the vessel that you're using is limited and the escape burns take a long time. And in part 3, which was the last part, we showed a better way of doing, better way of setting up these escape burns using a Python widget, which was set up in a Jupyter notebook, which was available for download. And this picks up from that last episode. At the end, we completed a maneuver where we had reduced the effective thrust capability of the Delta glider by a factor of 10 from its standard default setting, and had set up with some precision an escape burn for a trans-Venus injection to take us on a Hohmann transfer from Earth to Venus. We're going to start again from the same starting point that we have for the last couple of parts, which is to say we've got our Delta glider into a 300 by 300 kilometer circular orbit that's coplanar with the hyperbolic trajectory that we want to get into in order to in order to inject ourselves into the transfer orbit to Venus. And this time we're going to go and reduce the thrust capability of the Delta glider by a further factor of 10, so it's 1/100th. It will be 1/100th of the capability of the standard Delta glider. And we'll see how we get on under these circumstances using the Python widget to implement the escape burn. It will turn out that it's actually pretty accurate still, and we'll see. Okay, rather than go through everything in laborious detail, which I tried to do last time, I'm going to go through things reasonably quickly and explain only those things that might be new or different from last time. So if you're having difficulty following this, then I suggest you go back to the earlier videos and recap on where we have got to. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get Orbiter running. There you are. No longer paused. I'm going to open up IEAT MFD, Ion Engine Attitude and Thrust MFD, and I'm going to change the main engine maximum thrust. Now, if you remember before, we pressed the engine button, which opened up the dialog, and I entered in a new value, which was the new maximum engine thrust that I wanted. The current setting, which is the default setting, is 320,000 newtons. Last time, in the last part of the series, I put in 32,000 newtons, which was a tenfold reduction. So this time I'm going to put in 3,200 newtons, 1/100th of the default setting. Okay, that's really all I need IEAT MFD for. It's now changed the maximum capability of the Delta glider's engines. If we go over to burn time MFD, we can see that by looking at the mass flow rate. It's normally, for the standard Delta glider, 8 kilograms a second, and we have now dropped this down to 80 grams per second. So this is a 100-fold reduction indeed. If we look at our acceleration, then we're looking at an acceleration of 22.5 centimeters per second. So G is of the order of 9.8 meters per second. So let me just get a calculator up. If we divide one by the other, so 9.8 divided by 0.225. So this is going to be 1/43rd. Well, let's call it 2% of it, roughly 2% of a G. So that's the maximum acceleration that we can get out of our engines at the moment, 0.02 g. So not a huge acceleration is now available from our engines, and we'll see what difference that makes. Alright, so we've set the engines. The next thing I want to do is I want to load up Pursuit MFD, and I want to go into the, for what is for Pursuit MFD, the standard prograde orientation with wings level to the horizon by pointing in the prograde, along the prograde vector. And we'll just let it do that. Now I want to use the widget to calculate what my escape burn ought to be. Let me just get rid of that for the time being. I'm just loading up here on the screen the Jupyter notebook version of the Python script that solves the escape burn problem. And as before, let me just restart and clear all of the output. I need to load in the various packages that the Python script will be using. I need to load in some standard or some functions that I've defined that solve the problem, and then I need to enter in the parameters that describe my orbit and the orbit that I want to achieve. Mu is the gravitational constant. Again, this was discussed extensively last time. It hasn't changed. We're still about Earth. We're still making an escape from Earth, so no change there. Because we're using the same scenario, we're starting from the same 300 by 300 kilometer circular orbit. And we do have to assume it's a circular orbit for these calculations to work. So we put in the 6671000 meters is our current orbital radius. The effective exhaust velocity of the stuff coming out the back end of the Delta Glider's engines hasn't changed. It's still 40 kilometers per second. The gamma, the fuel flow rate, as we pointed out earlier, has dropped down to 80 grams per second, so that's 0.08 kilograms per second. The V infinity, the hyperbolic excess velocity that we will have once we have escaped, we are a long way from Earth and have escaped Earth, will be the same as our TransX plan requires, which is 3,315.067 meters per second. The only thing that we don't know at the moment, and which we'll just have to double check very quickly, is our propellant mass, or our ship mass. And that is currently 14179.07 kilograms. I'm just going to go back to the Python script and double check that, 14179.07. So that's the same as we had before, and I will enter in those values by hitting Shift Return in the Jupyter notebook. So all of that stuff is now loaded. Now I have to guess an amount of time that this thing is going to take. Since we've reduced the burn thrust by another factor of 10, it's probably going to take about another 10 times as long as it did the previous time, which was about 1600 seconds. So we're going to put in, for sake of argument, 16,000 seconds. Yep, that's right, about a sixth of a day or 4 hours. We'll go hit return, and that solves the problem. Actually, I was wrong. The model says, okay, your first guess was 16,000 seconds based upon that simple heuristic, but in practice it's actually going to take us 25,700 seconds, and we're going to burn, now wait for it, 6,266 meters per second. If you recall in the first video, the burn requirement was of the order of about 3,600, 3,000 meters per second according to TransX. It turned out to be a little bit more than that, closer to 4,000 meters per second. So by reducing the thrust of the Delta Glider 100-fold, we have added 2,300, 2,400 meters per second to our DV requirements to execute this burn. This is a general feature of low thrust burns. They generally cost more in terms of DV than impulsive burns do. We just have to live with that if all we have is a low thrust engine. And typically for low thrust engines, the fuel availability is not as important as the thrust limitation. We normally have surplus fuel but very limited thrust. The orbital periapsis at the end of the burn will be 24,000 kilometers, so this is way above the current orbital radius of 6,671 kilometers, and we need to be cognizant of that and set up TransX accordingly. And we need to start our burn 2,600 seconds before we arrive at the periapsis of the hyperbolic target orbit that we want to insert ourselves into. And by the time we have finished the burn, we will be at an orbital radius of 50,000 kilometers. So well on our way to the moon, really. A long way from Earth. Now, because the burn was going to take such a long time, the ideal time to start the escape burn is MJD 57727.9. If you look at our MJD currently, it is 57728. So we're actually past the time that is optimal for this burn. Now, in principle, I should have got into orbit an orbit earlier so that I could have probably had a better timing. For this particular case, the discrepancy isn't that big. I'm just going to live with it. But when we come on to the last part of this series, where we reduce the thrust by another factor of 10, we are definitely going to have to be more cognizant of which day we get into orbit, because it will take about 4 days for us to execute the escape burn. So really we have to get into orbit 4 days earlier than our escape plan requires, in order for us to get an eject trajectory that matches the one of our TransX plan. Okay, but we're going to live with it for the time being. And we'll just ignore the fact that there's going to be a timing error. Now we need to basically, I'm just going to copy over that plan so that I don't have to swap between screens. Go over to my sticky page and copy it in there. And now I can close out that for the time being. And right, let's go through things now. View over to the escape plan. The first thing I need to do is change the PE distance to the orbital periapsis at the end of the burn, which is going to be 24,325.88 kilometers. So let me just put that in. 24325 and then 880 meters. So here you can see what's going to happen. Our periapsis, or our orbital radius, is currently this green circle in the center here. By the time we have finished our burn, our periapsis of our trajectory will have risen all the way up out here to 24,000, a radius of 24,000 kilometers. So that's a difference of around 18,000 kilometers. Okay, we've still got this relative inclination error of 0.0046 degrees. I'm not going to worry about that. If I were being finicky, I would have sorted that out prior to this point, but for the purposes of this demonstration, it's not really going to be an issue. Now, we need to set up burn time MFD so that we get a burn of the right duration. To start off with, we're going to make use of the burn DV estimate that has come out of our Python plan, and that's 6266.638 meters per second. I'm just going to be naive and put that number in, 6266.638 meters per second. Now that says that the estimated burn time is 25,754 seconds. And that's about 53 seconds more than the duration of the burn calculated by the Python code. The difference is due to a burn time MFD error. And what we have to do is reduce the delta V in burn time MFD such that the estimated burn time matches the Python plan's estimate of 25,701. And we can only do this really by trial and error. So I'll put in a DV of 6260 and see how we get on. That's brought it down a fair bit, but not enough. 6265. Sorry, I think I got that wrong. Yes, 6265. 25,748. Closer. So change it again, 6266. That's a little bit too high. So we'll go halfway, 6265.5. And sorry, I'm getting lost here. That's still too high. DV 6260. DV 6255. Still too high. 6250. Too low. 6252.5. 700 still too low. 6252.6 and 6252.7, and that's about as good as we're going to get. 25,701 seconds is the estimated burn time in burn time MFD versus the plan requirement of 25,701 seconds. The time to periapsis is now 2,700 seconds, and I need to start the burn in 2,589.59 seconds before periapsis. So in just over 100 seconds I need to start this burn. Let's just review things. I've set up the PE distance, I set up the escape plan and the PE distance in TransX, so that's all good. I'm locked into the prograde orientation courtesy of Pursuit MFD, and I've set up the correct estimated burn time in burn time MFD so that I can burn for exactly that amount of time. Okay, so we're ready to go. Number I want is 2589.6, so I have to wait for this to get down to 25. We'll call it 2590. So when this gets down to 2590, we begin the burn. I'm just going to put in a bit of 10x quickly. There we are. A little bit more. Just a little bit to go. Burning. Now, I'm probably out by half a second or so because the accuracy of the display in TransX just isn't quite precise enough for me to set it up with fractional of a second accuracy. But with a burn duration of 25,701 seconds, half a second here or there shouldn't make a huge amount of difference. So we're going to, that's okay. We'll still end up with a very accurate solution. Now, 25,701 seconds is, let's get up a calculator again, 25,700 divided by 3,600. It's going to be a 7-hour burn. Obviously, I'm not going to record this burn in real time for 7 hours. Let's see what we get if we have a 10x time warp. 25,700 divided by 10 divided by 3,600. Even at 10x, it's going to take around about 45 minutes, 43 minutes, something like that. So that's still too high. Let's divide by 10 again. So it's going to be 100 times time warp times 60. And even at 100 times, it's going to take us 4.3 minutes. But that's acceptable. I think we can watch the screen for 10 minutes. Okay. Before I do that, I'm just going to tilt the screen down, with any luck, so we can see the Earth go by. And we can see that it's going by reasonably slowly there. Get rid of the sticky for the time being, we don't need it while we're executing the burn. We're burning in the prograde orientation, but we're now viewing down towards the planet, which is a more appealing way to view these maneuvers. Have a hell of a long time to go, 7 hours of real time. What did we calculate? 4 minutes of time warp time. So let's gingerly go up to 10x, and then we're going to start increasing the time warp speed to 20 times. It's okay. 30 times. 40 times. I'm being a bit gingerly, approaching this a bit cautiously, because I know that with the screen capture on, things tend to go a little bit awry at high time warps. But we'll see how we get on. 50 times. Here comes sunrise, and our first lap around the planet. 60 times. 70 times, it's okay. 80 times. 90 times. And 100. There we are. And you can see us beginning to spin away from the Earth. So I'll just get that in view. Of course, this is all happening in real time, 100 times slower than this. But you can see that our orbit is slowly beginning to wind its way away from the planet. And we'll just keep on going round. So we've completed half an orbit now. We started our burn somewhere over here, so we're coming up to about 3/4 of an orbit now. Still a long way to go. The semi-major difference is going to be wildly oscillate around wildly. We're going to ignore that for the time being. In fact, there's nothing we're going to do with it at all until we complete this burn. Our radius, let's see, our PE has now risen to 11,000 kilometers. It will rise to 24,000 kilometers. The delta V, according to TransX, that we have remaining on the burn is about 2,700 meters per second. According to the burn time MFD, it's about 1,000 meters per second more than that. Burn time MFD is right. TransX is wrong. And we'll just keep on going around. That's about as far down as I can dip the screen. And you can see that our orbit is slowly extending out into an eccentric ellipse. There goes Australia. And we've done about 1 1/4 laps around the planet. Sorry, excuse the cough. There's 9,000 seconds to go on the burn in real time. Not at our time warp time. Semi-major difference is coming down to 43 degrees. And it's beginning to shape up. We're approaching hyperbolic escape now. Now all this is hands off. I'm not doing anything at this stage. All of the autopilots are driving this process at this point in time. And the only thing I really have to play around with is the time warp button. Right, now we've got escape. 3,600 seconds, 1 hour to go on the burn. And you can see that the arms of the hyperbolic orbit are now sort of unfolding to match the overlay with the target hyperbolic orbit. And our focus PED that we've got in our current orbit is 23,000 kilometers, and it'll finish off at 24,330 kilometers. So I'm just going to go back to 10x for the last bit of the burn. The semi-major difference is down to 1.7 degrees and continuing to fall. We have 115 meters per second left on the burn. The delta V over here on TransX now is beginning to line up pretty closely with the target delta V. When they hit 0, they're going to match. When the time to cut off gets to 0, when we finish the burn, these two numbers will match. The green actual trajectory that we're on at the moment is lining up very nicely now with the hypothetical planned trajectory. And we'll just come back to real time shortly. The last 10 seconds of the burn coming up. Semi-major difference is now down to 0.007. And there you have it. The delta V error is 0.15 meters per second. And the semi-major difference error is 0.05 degrees. And if you compare that with the 4-degree error that we had for our TransX burn using the standard methodology, that's pretty darn good. Using linear RCS, I'm just going to tidy this up a little bit. And there we go. And then a little bit of 1. That's about as low as it's going to get, I think. Yeah, most of the residual error is actually due to a plane change. So I'm now pressing 8 to change the our orbital plane. So the error in the semi-major difference is entirely due to an error in our plane alignment due to a plane offset. And there you go. So there we are, probably 1 meter a second in terms of linear RCS just to tidy up that burn, and we're done. We're now on our way to Venus. Now one thing I'm going to do now, which I didn't do previously, which is load up TransX again, go over to View, maneuver mode is off, that's fine. Now I'm going to go forward. Yes. I'm just going to turn off the eject plan, so I'm just going to null out all of the components here. Enter, reset that, enter, reset that, and reset that. So just emptied out the home and transfer plan that we put in to set up TransX in the first place. And I just want to see how we're doing relative to our proposed encounter with Venus. We're no longer hitting Venus. We are now have a PED periapsis distance of 226,000 kilometers. So roughly 2/3 the way between the Earth and the Moon. So close, but not exactly a bullseye. Two things are going on here. One is that we didn't actually start the burn at the right time. If you remember, we're about 1 orbit too late in executing the burn. We had to do 1 complete loop of the planet before we started the burn, and that was just leaving it a little bit too late. So we had an error there. The other issue is more subtle in that our periapsis is now lifted way away from the Earth, and TransX really doesn't take that into account when it calculates the the optimal plan. So we have an error that's due to the fact that basically we can't execute an instantaneous burn, and this leads to an error in the very construction of our hyperbolic transfer or hyperbolic escape orbit. And it's just a limitation on the way that TransX works. We can, when we're a little bit away from Earth, execute a maneuver to bring our closest approach to Venus down to a more acceptable number. But we're on our way to Venus, and we just got a minor mid-course correction to execute to get there. Just go outside for a moment and look back to where the Earth is, and it should be behind us somewhere. Let's go down. There we are. That's how far away we are when we finish the burn. We just finished the burn a few minutes ago, and we are a long way away from Earth. But we're from the center of the Earth. We're about 50,000 kilometers. So about, what's that, 1/8 the way to the moon. This is the price we pay for these long burns. Everything happens much more slowly and over much longer distances than it does with the very powerful default settings of the Delta Glider engine. Okay, let's go finish this part. In the next part, basically, I'm going to take the thrust setting for the Delta Glider engines down another factor of 10 and just show what happens there. And we're going to see that the technique still works, but we are, even at that level of thrust, we are beginning to push the bounds of a credible escape burn using this technique, not because of a limitation of the technique per se, but because the TransX just isn't capable of setting up an escape trajectory that takes into account the consequences of these very long duration burns. And we have to start thinking about doing something a little bit more subtle, which is to play around with IMFD, so that we just bring forward or delay our ejection burn just by a fraction of a few seconds, so that we can have a better and closer encounter with Venus in this particular instance. But that'll be for next time. All right. Yep. Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode.